Now, in a bid to reduce trade costs and enhance a more transparent trade enabling environment in Nigeria, the federal government has approved the implementation of the 2022 fiscal policy measure made up of the supplementary external tariff 2022 to 2026 and excise duties on non-alcoholic beverages, cigarettes, as well as telecommunication services with effect from April the 1st. That's tomorrow. Now, the development is set to reduce import duties, stimulate growth in critical sectors of the economy, which now form new chapters of the Chapter 99 in the ECOWAS Common External Tariff to be implemented in the country. Joining me live in our Lagos studio, virtually to discuss this and much more, looking at the developments leading up to this implementation and approval, I have the West Africa Global Trade Advisory Lead at Deloitte, Chijioke Odo. We seem to have some connection issues there with Mr. Chijioke Odo. We are going to just move right up to the foreign scene. Now, lower oil prices look set to also boost European and US markets at the open, with the European futures rising 0.49%. Germany's DAX futures also gained 0.61%, and Nasdaq futures held up 0.4%, while the S&P 500 futures added 0.15%. But shares in Asia were hurt by data showing that activities in China's factory pattern and services sector swung into negative territory in the month of March, contracting simultaneously for the first time since the peak of the country's COVID-19 outbreak in 2020. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan fell 0.56%, led by a 1% drop for Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index and a 0.77% decline for China's blue chips. The euro held at a one-month high against the US dollar today, having rallied on hopes the war in Ukraine might be entering a new de-escalating phase, while the yen was set for its worst month since November 2016. The European single currency rose as high as $1.11 in early trade, which is its highest level in a month, having gained 1.7% so far this week. Overnight now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite were down, following similar downward movements in European stocks. Well, we just established connection there with West Africa Global Trade Advisory Leader Deloitte, Chijioke Odo. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, Mr. Odo.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's start off with the approval for the implementation of the 2022 fiscal policy measures. The conversations that necessitated this move, especially around tariff amendment and looking at the pricing for 2022 to 2026 and excise duties on alcoholic beverages, cigarettes, and as well as telecom services. This takes effect from tomorrow. What do you think this portends for the local economy here in Nigeria, and how do you see this also facilitating trade?
Okay, so I think a good place to start would be, just to go back to basics a little bit, and for us to recognize what fiscal policy measures are. Many governments use spending and taxation to influence the economy. In Nigeria, we see fiscal policies in action when government spends what is appropriated in the budget, and when tax laws are enacted or amended. So, I mean, the question now is, so what then are these 2022 fiscal policy measures if we have tax laws amended and we have this formal ceremony where we sign these laws? So why do we have this almost a document that goes around and says to our government, says, look, I'm doing XYZ with respect to duties and tariffs. Over the past few years, the government has amended specific provisions of a specific legislation. Okay, so this is the customs excise tariff Consolidation Act. And these provisions are where you have what import duty rates are applicable, what excise duty rates are applicable, what is prohibited for importation, what is prohibited for export, and every other thing you see around tariffs and duties. Now, the question is, what happens when you amend tariffs, whether you turn them up or you send them down? It will depend on the current state of the economy at that time. So when you increase tariffs, typically what you're doing is you're saying you either want to discourage the importation of a particular item, or you want to say, look, I want to get more revenue. So if you pick the numbers over a particular period and say how much a product A, how much income can I get if I increase the tariff? Will I maintain the level of import of that particular material? It will now determine why government has done this. Now, you will see certain increases or decreases. For us, we might not really know exactly what the government has seen. We might guess, depending on what the government has announced, during the budget, what the president announced during budget speeches. But what we'll do for the economy, specifically, if you look at what has been amended, you will see that there seems to be a continuous focus on encouraging the manufacturing sector. So you typically see that where there are reductions in tariffs, those reductions are given to materials, products that are material serve as inputs to the manufacturing sector. In other words, the government is trying to say, let us see how we can continue to incentivize the manufacturing sector, especially with all the pressures that they have seen over the past couple of years. Another thing is to say, I'm increasing tariff because I believe that a particular product coming into the country is competing with a particular industry in Nigeria. And so why don't I increase the tariff, okay, and make it a lot more expensive for Nigerian consumers to buy imported products, thereby making the product manufactured locally competitive. With respect to excise, now excise is a very interesting one. 2-3 years ago, or rather a year ago actually, the only products that were excisable were tobacco products and alcoholic beverages. Now, what we have seen with the Finance Act of 2020, where the government said, look, we want to start excising services provided by telecommunication services. And then recently, the government is saying, look, we also want to start excising non-alcoholic beverages. So those are your carbonated drinks. Now, what government is doing there is, on one hand, they're saying, and we perhaps think we can make money from services provided by taxing the services or further taxing the services provided by telcos, and then saying that, look, for the carbonated drinks, maybe we can also make money, but over and above that, we think that we need to continue to protect the well-being of our people. And if we think that by consuming more sugar, which is what is typically connected with these products, then maybe if we excise it, then there will be lower consumption of these products, and maybe government doesn't spend a lot more money on healthcare. So in the broad sense, that's what the government is trying to do. So tariffs, let's increase tariffs, reduce the consumption of certain products, reduce the tariffs. Let's see if we can get products for manufacturing companies cheaper. Let's excise certain products to see if we can continue to discourage the consumption of certain products while also making money. And finally, let us put some items on the prohibition list. So for the government is saying we don't want this product bought by Nigerians. So let's put on the prohibition list. But over and above, everything is centered around cross-border trade in Nigeria and duties that are levied or imposed on certain companies who are manufacturing certain products.
Well, now, at a point in time where we're also seeing global shipping charges hit a skyrocketing high, raising inflationary pressure. Now, let's also look at the fact that we also have this new Chapter 99, looking at the national list consisting of items with import duty reduction with the aim of promoting and stimulating growth in critical sectors of the economy. At a time when the Nigerian economy is pretty much fragile, how do you see this bring in some stability?
I think we need to situate the shipping charges and what the government has done in respect to what you said, putting certain items under Chapter 99. Now, Chapter 99, without going too detailed, it's just the way, if you look at if you're familiar with how the Nigerian Customs levy duties, you typically have a tariff code, and then you have a rate applied to that code. All these tariff codes are arranged in 97 chapters generally, okay? But of course, there are chapters that are exclusive, or chapters that are saying, they are reserved for certain issues. Now, the products that the government wants to put under Chapter 99, okay, are products that are typically imported. All the government is saying is, the products I'm putting under Chapter 99 are products in which I intend to reduce import duties. And those items in that Chapter 99 are items that reductions will only be accessible to manufacturing companies who are buying these products as input to their manufacturing process. So that has always been that has not always been the case, but government has always reduced import duties on certain items. It's just that those reductions have been accessible to the general public. Now the government is saying they would not be accessible to the general public anymore. They would only be accessible to manufacturing companies, and therefore, to segregate those who will benefit from these reductions, we will take all these items and we will put them in a separate chapter, so that as a manufacturer and also as administrator of Nigerian Customs Service, they can also know that these items are only accessible to these people. So only these manufacturers can have access to these reductions here. With respect to shipping charges, shipping charges are rising, and of course we know what's happening globally. And what that can only mean is, if transportation cost is one of the costs that manufacturers or even consumers have to bear, because if you look at the cost of manufacturing something, you have to import it, so you have to pay for you have to buy the product first of all, you have to transport it to Nigeria, and of course if it's a finished product you sell. If it's not a finished product, of course you convert it to a finished product. Now, if shipping charges are going up, that means that the cost of production has gone up. So what you could say is the government is also saying, I'm also going to continue to focus on amending tariffs, and in many cases for manufacturers, reducing the duty rates in such a way that the increases that I am seeing, not just in shipping in shipping prices, but also forex, I can see if I can give them some relief by reducing the duties that they pay when these products come in such a way that those rates, those increases are counteracted by the reduction by the government. And of course, the government also say, by also reducing these rates, what I do is that I enable the manufacturers to be more prosperous. And of course, when they are more prosperous, of course, they employ more people. When they employ more people, then they make more money. And when they make more money, I can now subject that profit to income tax. And of course, the government has a way of getting that money back from the economy.
Okay, now, Mr. Odo, let's also look at one of the biggest realities we have to face today. Now, what's taking the center stage is the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So that almost brings to a smaller reality the fact that we still have COVID-19 here with us. Now, the president has also approved the extension of the fiscal policy measures to facilitate the importation of COVID-19 essential medical supplies. And then we're also looking at tax exemption in terms of value-added tax, and also exempted from paying import duty as well. How do you also see this also helping our fight against COVID-19 and also revitalizing the drive to ensure that we have a well-rounded economy that bounces back much stronger, especially at a time where the big focus still remains Russia, Ukraine, and not necessarily on COVID-19. You look at the likes of China, they're increasing figures of COVID-19 cases there within the Asian region. We wouldn't want to have such play out here. So how critical would you say this element, the extension here, also helps us to manage this COVID-19 case in the country?
If you look at again, it depends on what region you are getting your news from. In certain parts of the world, you see COVID cases rising. So one would say that we are not out of the woods yet, but generally the world has moved on beyond COVID. You get COVID, you have a small cough or have headache, or in most cases
we are maneuvering our way through.
Exactly. So government is saying, okay, maybe this is not the right time to stop to stop the relief. Let's provide more relief for the importation of these essential items, which would typically be subject to import duties and VAT. Let's continue to reduce the cost of these items so that in terms of the necessary equipment or therapeutics that are required to make things easy for Nigerians to recover, let's do that. But it's pretty much government saying let's go through to 2022 and ensure that we have fully recovered before we now remove the reliefs. I think it's also important to ask ourselves how we got here. When COVID happened, we had to provide some form of relief. Many governments are providing relief. And so the WHO, the World Customs Organization, they came to me and said, look, what are those items in which we think that if governments are able to remove the taxes on, it makes the cost of providing healthcare to infected patients easier. And so they came up with an indicative list, okay, and circulated globally. The Nigerian government, of course, picked up that list and looked at the things that felt, okay, maybe we can produce it here, so I don't need to provide any relief. And for the ones that we don't produce here, maybe ventilators, protective kits, test kits, let's make it cheaper. And so what they did was they took out the duties and they took out the VAT. That has happened 2020, effective May 2020. We have gone 2 years now. At the end of next month, it'll be 2 years. So government is saying let's wait till end of 2022, and then maybe by effective 2023 we can have things come back to normal. Hopefully, the trends we are seeing in other regions of the world where there's an uptick in COVID cases, it rebounds again, and then we don't have COVID. We already have enough issues with the Russia-Ukraine crisis.
Lastly now, Mr. Odo, what do you also make of the 90-day grace period, especially for importers who opened the Form M prior to who entered the irrevocable trade agreement before the coming of this new circular? How do you see this having a more inclusive outlook and then given enough time?
No, I mean that's what we expect of the Nigerian government. You don't just introduce policies or laws, and then especially when it affects the investing public, and you introduce it to this circular was released to the public. I mean, the public got wind of those policies last week Friday, and so you ask yourself if you want to say, look, let's implement on Friday. Let's give a window, because remember, businesses, manufacturers, investors, they plan ahead. Okay, so 90 days is 3 months. So let's give these manufacturers, producers, and the investing public enough time to transit to these new policies. It's always useful to provide that transitional window. So what the government has simply done is to say, look, if you've opened a Form M, which is essentially a permit to import, using a very basic example, is a very basic description is to say, many businesses, before you import anything into Nigeria, you open a Form M. Okay, so once from the Form M opening process to the time your goods get into Nigeria into your warehouse, it takes a while. So if people have already entered into transactions, and those transactions are based on rates, duties that have been implemented, have been affected by the government, it only makes sense, only makes good business sense to say, let us give them time to adjust. Let's ensure that whatever deals that they have gone into remain sacrosanct. Those deals are not affected by government policies. Okay, anyone who goes into any deal should know exactly what they will get. And so 90 days is enough time to say, if you have gone into any transaction, okay, prior to the introduction of this measure of these policies, we will allow that transaction to be concluded. And we will give you 90 days to conclude that transaction. But any new transaction you want to get into, these are the rates and the duties that you will pay.
Thank you so much for your time on the show so far, Mr. Chijioke Odo. Definitely we'll keep our fingers crossed and have another analysis of the import prohibition list we've had so far as we are wrapping up the last active year of President Muhammadu Buhari. We have to do an analysis of how this has also shaped the Nigerian economy, and we hope you'll be open to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be happy to come back.